Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second crossover episode of Meet Me Nation and the Rivalry, where currently a dark shroud has descended upon the UTSA faithful. After almost 3 years of being viewed as the G5 team to beat, the Roadrunners are now face-to-face with the ghost of seasons past. The question now is, can the Fighting Jeff Trailers pull themselves into being conference championship contenders again, or will the dreaded and vacant Taco Bell student section make its presence known? We're going to talk about that and a lot more. We're joined today by Kelechi and David Harrison, as well as Josh and JP from the Rivalry. Guys, how you guys doing?
Good.
Good, man. Thanks for having us.
For sure. Yeah, I think we can just jump right into the first question. Josh, big Michigan fan. Obviously, we UTSA fans. Rough last couple games against Texas especially. How are you guys feeling after the loss? Michigan doing a bit better than us, 31-12. Meanwhile, us getting steamrolled 7-56. How's everyone feeling? How are you guys doing emotionally?
Yeah, not great. Thanks for asking. So for me as the as the Michigan contingent of the Rivalry, I went into the Texas game knowing that Michigan were, 7.5 point dogs, something like that at home. But it felt to me, and this is why I said on in our stuff, it felt to me a lot like the 2021 Ohio State game where Michigan went in about the same underdog level at the end of the year, but it was at home, and you knew what you were facing, you knew the machine that was coming in, but you felt like you could rely on your ground game. You felt like you were a couple plays away from being able to pull off an upset, and obviously in 21, Michigan did. The little poetry and art of sports is that Quinn Ewers is on that Ohio State team. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, wouldn't this be something? Michigan kind of in the same spot. Here's a juggernaut offense with a defense that has looked susceptible in the past. We'll lean on them until they cry uncle. That's what Michigan football does. It's not what Michigan football in 2024 does. I'm not sure what Michigan football in 2024 does at this stage of the season. But man, Texas is just a machine right now. You guys saw that. Michigan saw it. It's not just on the Michigan side, not just the fact that Michigan got beat. It's the fact that, like, from front to back, Texas was just worlds away a better football team. And just, I don't even know, kind of look at the national landscape, I don't even know how you slow that down. Like, I know, you look at teams like Georgia and you can go, okay, struggling on the road at Kentucky, there's a couple things you could exploit. I don't see weaknesses for Texas right now. And I wish Texas shooting up to number one in the country made me feel better about how Michigan performed. It doesn't. But credit Texas. They're an incredible football team.
Josh, I guess, do you feel like y'all's current ranking of 18 is justifiable? Would you have you guys higher or lower?
I think it's pretty fair. It's tough this early in the season to know what this season is going to be. Recording this right before the USC game, the USC game is going to be the determining factor of what kind of season Michigan wants to have. They get 60 minutes on Saturday to decide, are all of our goals in front of us, or is this very much a rebuilding year and we're just going to kind of trudge through week after week? But I think where they're at is good. I think it's hard to argue that you should be higher when your offense just isn't producing. You haven't beat anybody yet. Fresno State is a decent football program, but also, that's a game you're supposed to win. Arkansas State, a team that you should beat. Until you start beating teams like USC, teams that you're either an underdog or it's pretty evenly matched. Yeah, why rank you in the top 15? I think it's a pretty good spot for them to be in, and Saturday will tell us a lot about where they're headed.
Nice. Yeah, Kelechi, David, how do you guys feel about last week's game? I know at least the first quarter wasn't too bad. Going to the second, it was like 7-14, I think, at the best, and then after that, they absolutely pulled away. But it wasn't, I guess, a total heartbreak. Definitely felt like there was some improvements from maybe the Texas State game. But what do you guys think?
Man, no, yeah. Well, to differ from Josh's point of view, we kind of had different expectations for this game. We really just came in and we wanted to see, how the offense was going to look, how Owen going to bounce back, from his kind of slow start last week. And most of those answers are still out there, man. I think this next game we have coming up this week is, back at home. We're getting some guys back from injury. We got a little banged up this past weekend. I think that's going to be the game that tells us a lot about this team. There's still so many questions, man, and I did like the way that we attacked Texas defense, especially in that first half. We were moving the ball pretty well, pretty fairly well. That I still had talked some crap to my Texas friends, but that quickly died down a little bit. But yeah, man, we just still a lot of questions, and it's hard to really gauge where this team is at when you're playing such a juggernaut, of an opponent. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. I again, I think it's like Kelechi said. You saw some spots where it's like, hey, this looks better than it has in the past couple weeks. I did Robert Henry breaking off a 40-yard run or whatever that was in the first half. Like that was more than they had against the entire Texas State offense or defense. And so I'm like, okay, there's a spot where, hey, it looks like there's some improvement that's happening. But again, it's so hard when you're playing a team that top to bottom is just leaps and bounds better to say, all right, they made improvements from the Texas State game. And again, even I think a team like Houston Christian, I think it's just going to be so hard to even tell that because they're not going to be very good. Yeah. And so it's like, how are you really going to be able to say, all right, this has changed, because they're going to be playing a team that's just not very good.
Yeah, I think also, like, for me, one of the biggest differences between this game and I think the previous game was, like, we had Will Stein, right? And I think he was pulling all the cards out, like all these hat tricks, all these crazy audibles. And for this one, it felt like we were just trying to get out of there alive. And so, definitely missed that. And then obviously having Frank Harris, dual threat, missing his experience was huge as well. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll kind of go into the second question, which you guys floated. This is more UTSA related, but you guys had asked, is UTSA being floated as a potential Pac-12 member something? How do we feel about that? What are our thoughts? And I wanted to kind of, lean into that first, which is saying that, like, I know a lot of people right now. Like, I posted this on Facebook on our main page, and like I was expecting everyone to be super hyped that we could go to the Pac-12. It was like a 50-50 split. Like 50% of the people literally were like, I don't think we should do it. A lot of them were saying, oh, it's a West Coast kind of game. We're going to have to travel a lot. I think currently, right, you can go to UNT. You can go a little more locally, Rice, and not have to drive too much for these away games. I think a lot of people are worried about that time difference. And then, Pac-12 after dark is fun for us, but maybe for the average fan who's a little bit older, maybe it's not going to be as entertaining.
For the East Coast fans, I can tell you right now, it's not quite as fun for us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of them, my opinion at least, is that a lot of people don't realize, like, maybe back like 5-10 years ago, time zones and things would be something that would be seriously considered. But now it seems pretty obvious, especially at the premier level where you've got these like top P5 programs, that they don't really care anymore about time zones at all. It's not relevant. And so my biggest fear, at least, is like I'm personally a big proponent of going to the Pac-12 simply because I feel like what's happening, like when we got to the AAC, we were super hyped. And then slowly what's happening now is like the AAC is almost turning into like CUSA 2.0 because you're losing more players to the Pac-12. And it feels like this domino effect where you've got this concentration of premier teams in these couple of conferences. And then meanwhile, all these other G5 programs that used to be, it's not a level playing field, but slightly more level, are starting to just collapse, where my biggest worry is like the flood levels are going to start rising. You can get to a point where those premier teams are going to be so far ahead and away from other teams that you're almost going to have to basically have almost like a European style Premier League just for them. And so I feel like for at least us, if the Pac-12 continues the way it's going, if they poach the teams they currently have in the AAC, the American Athletics Conference used to be the P5 jumping board for G5 teams. And that's probably not going to be the case anymore as the Pac goes on. So that's my idea behind it. But I guess, I'll lead with you and Kelechi, David, and then Josh, JP, you guys can go from there.
I guess kind of my thing, like kind of looking at the teams they're going to add into it, is it really going to be like it's never going to be the conference it once was, especially taking so many teams from the Pac-12. You're left with who is it? Oregon State and Washington State, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. and then you're adding in a bunch of Mountain West teams and some American teams. Like it's really just another Group of 5 conference. Like it's not going to be anything special. And when you're looking at it, you're taking in travel into consideration. You're taking viewership into consideration, especially for like West Coast games. It's hard for Texas people to watch this, like especially even when like I'm a Rangers fan. So when I watch the Rangers play in Los Angeles, they're starting at 9:00 at night, and like no one's going to be able to stay up and watch a 3-hour football game here in Texas. It's too late, and so it's just, to me, it's one of those things that's like, is it really going to be a big benefit in the end when you're basically, I feel like jumping to the Pac-12 is more of a lateral jump and less of a jump up, especially with what the Pac-12 is now.
Gotcha.
No, yeah, I definitely understand like the point you were saying, Dave. I would say like the only like real reason we should go is just for the money and the the TV deals that they have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't even take into account that we could be starting kickoff 10 p.m. Stuff like that. So it definitely will be a struggle to get our local fans probably more bought in during that time. But I think it's a great opportunity, man. It's still going to be the Power 4 conferences, I think, even when they bring the Pac-12 back. And I think that's what was so exciting about the AAC was that it was like that Power 6. It was that next big conference. And I think us moving to the Pac-12, we have a chance to be in that, next best again. And I think that'll help with recruiting. That'll help with, keeping some of our guys home. So I think it will be a good move, man. It just has to be right financially, because we're definitely going to lose some local fans and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Kelechi, you mentioned, obviously TV deals. I don't have the data in front of me right now, but I think, correct, you guys might know this more than I do, 2026, the ESPN deal with Pac-12 is going to expire, right?
Yeah, I know it was like at the end of, I thought it was the end of this year, but I guess it is these next few years.
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest worry, right? Is like, are they going to be willing to give the same level of attention to like essentially, a premier G5 conference?
Yeah.
But yeah, Josh, JP, what do you guys think?
JP, you go for it.
Yeah, I think those are fair points. We've seen glimpses of that. I mean, a little bit with the Big Ten expanding. Just talking from our side, like we added UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington. So like teams like Rutgers that are complete opposite sides of it. That's my second team. I mean, they're traveling to UCLA to play a game crazy late, and I can't stay up for that.
That's your fault for having Rutgers as one of.
Well, that's a whole nother topic. Okay, that's a whole nother topic for a different day. But yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, those looking at the game times for stuff like that just already makes me tired. Yeah, I think right now, like for the Pac-12, the name still holds a little bit of weight. So even just being able to add a team to that, I don't think the Pac-12 is tarnished. Like nobody looks at that right away and thinks that it's a weaker conference or anything. And so I think that would be an awesome move personally, just from an exposure standpoint. Like Kelechi said, getting recruiting and stuff going. I feel like it's a good move.
Yeah, I feel like you're looking at, the landscape of college football continues to change so much. So it's kind of looking ahead going, okay, we don't know where the whole staircase is going to lead, but you take the first step, right? Like that sort of thing. And so it feels like even if it, again, from a Big Ten kind of looking out sort of perspective, it feels like even if the move into the Pac-12 is more of a lateral move, I feel like that's probably the place you want to go, because you don't know what, with TV deals and all that stuff too, but you also don't know what playoff expansion could look like. Does the Pac-12 at some point end up with, you've got the Power 4 with the automatic bid and then the next highest conference champion. Does that shift where the Pac-12 now gets an automatic team in? Okay, well that's going to be a lot different than if you're still in the AAC. So, and again, you don't know that, but it feels like JP said, even some of that just natural brand recognition. And you look at teams like, Oregon State and Washington State and teams that maybe have a little bit more pull. When they do well, it brings the whole conference up. And so it is tricky. And the conference realignment thing is obviously a massive conversation that could go on forever about well, what does it mean for student athletes from UCLA, like you were saying, travel to Indiana, like for Rutgers to go out to Washington. Not just football either, What does it look like for Cal to be part of the Atlantic Coast Conference? But I think looking at a very foggy college football landscape, I think it's a good move. And as UTSA continues to build and produce good football, there's maybe a little bit more chance of exposure there playing in a conference like that, especially if you end up with let's say Oregon State gets real good again. Playing an in-conference game that means something that may have a playoff implication because UTSA is in there and is 9-1 against 10. Okay, now there's a little bit more excitement and energy there. So potential.
I guess kind of my thing going back to even speaking on Rutgers in the Big Ten. So a team like that is never going to be able to compete with the travel budget of a USC, a UCLA, a Washington. They're going to have basically unlimited funds. When you're looking at a team like UTSA, they're already don't have the most money to be doing things like that. And then you're going to basically say, all right, you're going to have to go to the West Coast X amount of times a year. Like, I guess that's where my kind of looking at it is. It's just going to be – it's already – like, the travel's already expensive enough trying to take football teams. And you're not even looking at football, looking at the other sports too. You're looking at the volleyballs, the soccers, the sports that aren't revenue sports that are going to be affected by this. And you're looking at it and you're like, how is a school that's already not – like doesn't have the most money going to be able to accommodate those teams and those schedules to be able to travel to the West Coast X amount of times a year?
Yeah,
I think, David, you bring really good points. And I think at least for myself, Josh and JP, obviously we're fans, not athletes. So we don't have maybe that intimate perspective. But I guess for you and Kelechi, when you guys currently in the past had to do those long travels for games, has that been like a huge impact? Do you feel like over your day-to-day life? I'm sure it's not easy at all. Do you feel like if we were in the Pac-12, for example, back when you guys were starting, do you feel like that would be like a really big negative as far as travel goes?
Oh, 100%.
For sure.
Like,
go ahead, Dave.
Like we would travel, so especially for golf, because you're not really playing home games playing golf. So we're traveling pretty consistently. And so, like, when we would go, say, we played a couple tournaments in California, a couple tournaments in Florida, like, you're getting home at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday night, and you're like, oh, I got to go to class Wednesday morning. I mean, that sucks. It sucks trying to be able to wake up and go to class when you're already like, dude, I didn't get home till 2:30 in the morning, and now I got to go sleep for 6 hours and wake up and go to class. Like, and I can't imagine, especially when you're flying from the West Coast, it makes it even worse because then it's getting even later as you fly in. And so it's such a toll on your body, especially just travel in general is already a toll on your body. And then when because you're playing a game and then you're flying back, especially so I think a football game ends at their 9:30, 10:30 local time, maybe call it 9:30 local time. I mean, they're not getting home till 2 o'clock in the morning at least. Yeah. And then they got to wake up, go get treatment, go to watch film. Like it's a beating.
No, it's a beating, man. I can remember one of our worst trips we had was when we played Army West Point in New York. I think it was a 2-hour and 45-minute flight. We leave a day before, probably around noon. We get there the day before, leading up to the game. All that is fine. Mm-hmm. Right when that game is over, let's say the game is at 7 o'clock. We're on the bus waiting to leave from 10 to about 11. You're leaving the bus at 11 p.m. to go to the airport, get on a plane. Just by the time we take off, it's around midnight.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining those West Coast games already starting later. Oh, man, they're not going to be getting home until 6 in the morning sometimes. I mean, I think the latest we got back was probably 3 or 4 in the morning. And that happened a few times.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes total sense, man. And David, thanks for being the counterpoint. Otherwise, it'd just be a room full of yes men.
I like to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. That kind of goes to our second question, which it's going to be kind of a mixture between what you guys sent us and what we put out, which was just that, obviously G5 right now is a kind of really shaky position. It definitely seems like, all these bigger conferences are trying to consolidate and build themselves up and secure themselves for whatever is coming down the line. I guess, what do you guys feel for the G5 status right now, as well as the P5 status? Obviously, it's not really P5 anymore; it's P4. How do you guys see that evolving? And then to go into the rivalry, the question you guys sent in, how is that going to basically impact like the current expanded playoffs as things progress. And whoever wants to start, go ahead and go.
I can start. I think the group of 5 is toast. I'm serious. It's so like I was even looking. Tennessee is going to start giving their players ticket sales.
Yeah.
Like they're adding 10% to every ticket they sell to give to their players. I don't think there's any group of 5 program that's ever going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so like, how are they supposed to compete? It's a rich get rich thing. Like Texas is good, but they're always going to be good because they have unlimited funds.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see the same. You even could look at the P4 and say, all right, there's going to be about 7 teams that are going to consistently be good for the next however foreseeable future, just because of the funds that they have, the alumni they have.
Yep.
And so there's no group of 5 program that can compete with that. Like there's no group of 5 school that's going to be able to say, all right, we're going to charge people 10% extra and be able to give it to our players. Because like, especially a lot of group of 5 schools, they're not in the biggest markets. And not a lot of people are going to pay $400, $500, $600 to go watch one of their games. But a school like Tennessee, a lot of people that go to the games are going to be donors. They're going to be former alumni. So that's just their way of giving back to the school. So I understand that. But I just don't – you're never going to see a school like a UTSA or a Texas State or even a Boise State to be like, all right, we're going to charge 10% more and we're going to give it to our players. It's just never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, I think this kind of proves that point as well. Like this past offseason, I think Ohio State spent over $20 million in NIL stuff to be able to bring back players. A UTSA, schools like that aren't going to be able to do that. I mean, that's why Ohio State is what Ohio State is this year and brought back so many guys, and we're able to bring Jeremiah Smiths into the school and bring in Quinshon Judkins, knowing that they already had a Travion Henderson. Mm-hmm. And schools that have that kind of budget, that kind of alumni that can bring in those NIL deals like that are going to reign supreme. And that's just kind of the way it's being set up.
Mm-hmm.
I think $20 million might be the UTSA athletic budget. I don't know.
I think
it might be the full athletic budget. So it's like
22 million or something. I think is what
around there.
The final number was 22 million.
So it's like,
man, just all I can say is I was a few years late, man. I was a few years late. But I think the gap between G5 and FCS is actually going to shrink, and I think we're kind of starting to see that already. We're going to be fighting for those same recruits now. Usually how it was the best players G5, they're looking to transfer P5, best FCS go to G5. I think the best FCS are just going to start skipping G5 and go straight to one of the Power 4 conferences. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to shrink the gap between the G5 and the FCS, man. And I think we're already starting to see that.
I mean, look at teams like, Liberty, obviously, like they're a new team, but they've got so much freaking money behind them. That's why they're able to move so quickly. And, obviously you guys mentioned UTSA, our budget's literally probably 20 million, probably a lot less. And so we're like, it's a rough place to be. But I guess, one of my worries though is like, obviously it seems to me, and I'm very conspiratorial minded, so I could be going off the leap here, but it definitely feels like these major networks are pulling a lot of these strings. And my biggest worry is just like obviously the essence of college football is a lot of that regionality, a lot of those rivalries, and is college football in the next 10, 20 years going to evolve into something where it's almost just like a G League for the NFL, where you no longer have that I guess, almost underdog essence that really makes the game interesting. That's sort of my biggest fear. But like, do you guys feel like that's going to eventually come to a point where maybe they'll pull back on what's happening right now? Or do you think we're just kind of on a train down to the line where it's going to be just this Premier League and then everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some sort of regulation to try to keep that from happening. Like the gap, like you guys said, the gap is there, and the gap is going to continue to happen. But money also talks, right? Like, and if as defunct as the NCAA is going to be soon, there's going to be, I just believe there's going to be limitations around things like NIL. I think there's going to be limitations around stuff like that keeps it from just being, well, I can just New York Yankees this roster because I've got money. Spending $20 million just to lose to Michigan for the 4th year in a row is crazy.
You don't even believe that. I don't even believe that.
You're right. I don't right now.
We've seen Davis Warren throw a football.
But here's what gives me hope, I guess, because again, I just, it's so hard to tell. I think there's going to be regulation around it. Is it too little, too late? Maybe. What gives me hope is seeing things like what Northern Illinois did in South Bend a couple weeks ago, right? Mm-hmm. Northern Illinois is not ever going to be a blue blood football program, cream of the crop, whatever. But the fact that they can go into South Bend and beat Notre Dame in the home opener, that's what makes college football so fun. So even as that gap continues, and again, hopefully, especially for the sake of the G5, hopefully it doesn't increase too much, because you want that competitive edge. The fact that a team like Northern Illinois can go, we're going to go in there and we're going to beat you. That still gives that hope. That still gives college football the edge that, the NFL doesn't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My hope is that there's a way to keep that, to preserve that, in the expansion. And I think one of the ways too is, making sure that scheduling protects rivalries is a big thing. Obviously, Michigan's going to play Ohio State every year. Sure. Yeah. I used to live in Stillwater, so Bedlam with Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, making sure that needs to happen every year. You have got to play that game every year. Stuff like that, I think, will help some of that. But again, it's foggy as all get out, man. It really is.
It's sad, but what I think it's going, in my eyes, is you're going to have a top, call it 25. You're going to have your top 25 teams. They're going to play their own little schedule. And I think it's going to turn into what basically the Premier League is. You're going to have everyone else fighting for the top 5 spots, and you're going to have the bottom 5 from that 25 going to go down, and you're going to promote 5 teams, and that's what it's going to be. Because if you look at it, everyone just kind of staying in their own little circle. Now you've got 20 teams in the Big Ten. You've got 20 in the SEC too. I think it's somewhere around there. And so it's that's all what they're doing already. Yeah. Because and they're splitting it basically. You're going to have the SEC East West. You're going to have the Big Ten East West, and that's kind of about it. Because even the Big 12 nowadays, it's still a good conference, but it's not what it used to be.
Yeah, for sure.
You basically lost Texas and Oklahoma, and you added Cincinnati, UCF, and Colorado, and Houston, and so it's really not what it used to be when it comes to what was up.
Technically, Houston's part of that conference. Yes.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things that it's what the Power 5 used to be is not what it is anymore. To be honest, you really got your Power 2. You've got the SEC, and you've got the Big Ten. You've got 1 or 2 teams in the ACC, a couple teams in the Big 12. But for the most part, that's what you got in college football right now, and that's how it's going to stay because money reigns supreme. And that's all anyone's worried about. And I think the thing about NIL is at this point, how are they going to regulate it? It's gotten they should have regulated it when it started. But they were kind of let's just
toothpaste out of the tube. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's at this point, it's how do you stop it when you're already paying guys I think I saw that Shedeur Sanders at Colorado has a $7 million NIL valuation. I'm sorry, where how are you gonna just be one season you're gonna be oh yeah, he can't make that anymore? How are you gonna do that anymore? I don't think you can. I think it's kind of the cat's out of the bag, and I don't think it's going back in.
No, yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Actually, Dave was if they didn't regulate it at the beginning, good luck now. Yeah. And kind of like you were saying, you can't just tell a kid, okay, well, this next year you're gonna have to cut off $3 million of the money you're bringing in.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. So I think it's just gonna, whether the rules or whatever they're gonna try and put in place, there's gonna be stuff happening under the table and whatnot, just like what's been going on for the past 100 years. So I think it's already hitting its full stride, and there's not much we could do about it.
And I think go ahead. No, go.
I was telling my dad, I honestly miss the way the old college football was. I'm I don't care if you do it on the table, do whatever you please. But I think as a fan, you knew it was happening, but it's it's not out in the open. You're not seeing guys signing $2 million deals. Yeah, it wasn't. You didn't see it happen, so it's still. You had your naive thoughts that it's happening, but it still kept the purity in a sense because you felt like these guys were playing because they love their school, they love playing football, and they want to win a championship. But now no one cares about that. They care about who's going to pay me the most money to go play. Yeah. Look at DJ Ukulele, whoever that is. He transferred 3 times in the last 4 years or whatever. Yeah. and he is terrible, but he's getting paid to be terrible. And so it's nowadays there's just no loyalty. It's just like, all right, how am I going to make the most money? It's like it's sad when guys are staying in college because they're going to make more money than they will on a rookie contract in the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that kind of bounces off to maybe back up, David, what you were initially talking about of not going to the Pac-12, because I think even in the power conferences currently, if you're a school that cannot compete financially with the UTs and with those type of schools, you're going to get players and staff poached. Like, I mean, for us at least, right, Trey Moore, like the guy got, I can't blame him. Like, you get a 6-figure deal to leave to go to UT. Like, obviously you're going to take that. And so I do think, it may even be like a non-point to discuss being in a power conference. It really comes down to how much money do you have at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But going in, then that segues into the rivalry. The question you guys sent in, which was like, what does having an expanded playoff mean then to current G5 members? Like, does it even matter? Is it kind of just like them throwing us like a pity bone? Is it going to actually have any effect long term? You guys feel?
No. I was talking about this with my buddies. I was like, will a group of 5 team ever win the college football playoff? A resounding no, because it won't ever happen. They just can't compete. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if you just look at the UTSA versus Texas game, because every year in the playoff, that's what it's going to be. You're going to have a group of 5 team that it's good. They're not great, but they're going to be good. But they won't be able to compete with a team like a Texas or a Georgia. It just won't happen. So I feel like that it's just a pity bone to say, oh, look, we're doing something for you, when it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think they pretty much had to include that just to really make the G5, stay relevant.
Yeah.
But I would say that the chance of them winning a game in the playoff is just so small, especially now because, like, let's just take our UTSA team for a couple years ago when we were undefeated and whatnot. Like, having a year like that, we could have competed with Texas like that year because Texas wasn't at the very top. Texas is going to be at the very top for the next 15 years. You just really have to get lucky and catch them on a down year. But like the chances of those schools having a down year is just so small now. That's why I think like the chances of us having any success in that playoff is just so small.
Yeah.
Josh, got any thoughts? Or did you go?
Yeah, I mean, look at Texas. Like, it's bad when you have a guy that's a backup that could probably start at any other FBS school in the country. Like, whenever you look at that and he puts up a 5-touchdown game as a backup, you're doing something right, but you just got a ton of money. When that guy's willing to be a backup for 2 years, knowing how good he is and knowing he could go to I would say maybe besides like a Georgia, but could go to any other school in the country and start right away. That's when you're like, all right, I got enough money to be like, I can kind of do whatever I want.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I think you guys are spot on NIL and regulation, all that stuff, and I agree. The expanded playoff, it's nice. It is, it's fun in a sense because you will have at least that 12 spot filled by somebody that will be the outsider, right? And there'll be a little bit of March Madness, like, hey, can they pull the upset?
Yeah.
And like it wouldn't surprise me to see, a 12 seed group of 5 champion or something like pull off a win at some point. But to your point, winning one game is, a Northern Illinois is a great example, right? Beating Notre Dame once, phenomenal and incredibly impressive. And I think that is a beautiful part of college football. But then to turn around in a week's time and go play Alabama.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's say that Jesus comes back and you beat Alabama, then you get to play Texas or Ohio State or Michigan. It's just the chances of you making any sort of wave is just so minimal. And so it's fun, it's good, it's important for where it's at right now to keep group of 5 teams relevant, to give a playoff opportunity. Because it does matter to those kids, like it absolutely does. For a Boise State or a Northern Illinois or whoever to get in there. But are they going to be able to compete with the top SEC and Big Ten programs? No, they won't be able to.
No.
Yeah, I think a lot of like those cool moments I kept thinking about back in the day when Boise State upset Oklahoma in the FCS game, and how cool of a moment that was in watching it live. Like, you'll have those on a rare occasion with that, but not consistent at all. A majority of them will be blowouts, similar to what you saw in Georgia versus TCU in the championship game, where it was one of the worst championship games I've ever seen, because the talent gap, even in that game, was just so drastic that it was just a snooze fest. And you're just going to get that more consistently across what's supposed to be an exciting playoff.
Yeah. And it's very interesting to me, like, because you look at like March Madness, where you look at you're taking 64 teams and they're going and playing. And yeah, I feel like you look at, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just football is such a more just I'm stronger than you, not really smarter. But in basketball, you see it so much more often. Like you see those 15 seeds that'll make it to the Sweet 16. But like, I don't think you'd ever see that in football, just because a school like Texas can just go in there and manhandle you. Like, that's pretty much what it is. Like, they'll go in there and say, all right, I'm better than you. We're stronger than you. We're just going to pound it down your throat till we win.
Yeah. And another thing, like with that, surviving that gauntlet of the playoff, man, you're going to have insane depth. Like one key injury, it could just completely screw a G5 team. But like Texas, for example, their starting quarterback is hurt for multiple weeks and they're going to be just fine. If that happened to, any other school in the country, that completely ruins their season.
Yeah.
So I think depth is just going to be such a huge part in that, and that's going to further increase that gap, man, that we're talking about.
Yeah.
With the way the top G5s are going right now, I think Northern Illinois is top ranked 23. Do you guys have any predictions as far as who do you think is going to come out on top as far as the G5s go?
I do, baby. I think the top G5 team is going to come out of the American Conference. Right now, I'm thinking either Tulane, or I'm thinking the Runners. We still have an outside fighting chance at it, but I think it's going to be one of those two teams, or whoever wins the AAC.
Yeah.
See, I see it being Boise State. I think they're just such a good offense. They can score points. Like, when you can keep up with Oregon on offense, that's a good football team, because Oregon scores more points than anyone I've ever seen. They put up so many points consistently. And when you can keep up with them in a football game, I think that's an offense that will go to a G5 team and put up 60 points. And so I think that's kind of my prediction, is I'm going to see Boise State taking that group of 5 spot.
Do you feel this might be like the last season or two where a G5 has the potential to do that kind of thing before the gap gets too big?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Josh, JP, you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like Boise State as well. I was hesitant to say them because I was second guessing myself on what conference they're in now, because anybody's in any conference and nothing matters. But yeah, I mean, Ashton Janty is just a phenomenal running back, and he's obviously a massive piece of that offense. Explosive player, I think has an outside shot at going to New York for the Heisman. I don't know if he'll win it. But yeah, that's a great example of a team that is kind of on the outside, has had some success. But absolutely, I mean, you're absolutely right. Look at what they did with Oregon. That you could argue they really should have won that game. And that's a team like that getting into the playoff is again, I've sung the praise of Northern Illinois long enough, but like, is a lot more fun than the Huskies getting in, because Northern Illinois is not going to beat anybody. They're just not going to. Boise State has enough talent to be able to again, how far do they go? I don't know. It might be a one-game thing, but like, that's a team that I can tell you right now. Like, if I'm looking at Michigan, man, going, okay, let's say Michigan kind of backs their way into the playoff here. They beat USC. They get right. They go 9-3. They do enough to get in. I don't want a piece of Boise State. I don't want to see that offense. Are you kidding me? I'll take my chance elsewhere. So yeah, I like Boise State as a good choice.
JP?
Yeah, I mean, that was my pick as well, Boise State. I actually got home from an Ohio State game and was finishing up, trying to drive home and pick up the Boise State-Oregon game. I forget what channel it was even on, but I had to like find some backwards way to watch the end of that. And I walked away impressed. I agree with what Jay said. I thought they had a really good chance. They honestly probably should have beat them that day. So that's the only team. I saw the end of the Northern Illinois game against Notre Dame, but if you listen to our podcast at all, you know that I don't respect Notre Dame at all. And so I think they're frauds. I think Marcus Freeman is a fraud. And so I think they're one of those teams I look at, and it just doesn't surprise me when they get upset. Yeah. But Boise State was wildly impressive to me.
Gotcha.
I have something I want to bring to the table because I saw it on social media the other day. I was looking through, and they were kind of showing Heisman odds for this year. And I don't know, I just was in awe when I saw that Arch Manning has better Heisman odds than Travis Hunter does.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at betting odds, Arch Manning has better betting odds than Travis Hunter.
That makes sense.
And I'm like, you've got a guy that's I would say a top 5 wide receiver in college football and a top 5 DB in college football. Yeah. And he's not getting any respect by anyone. And I don't understand why. And people are saying it's because Deion, and people don't really respect Deion in the college football world. But I kind of just want to get y'all's opinion. Like, why is no one respecting what that guy's doing? He's playing 100+ snaps a game and is an elite on both sides.
Yeah, I feel like the media kind of already favors Texas. Like, it doesn't matter how bad they do. Every year they get ranked. And Arch Manning had the red carpet, laid out to him. He's got the royalty behind him, right? He's got the name recognition. I feel like that carries a ton of weight behind it.
No, yeah, and I think it's more about his name, and because people saw that he is fast, and they're gonna run with it, man. They're gonna run with it.
I think I saw a Heisman thing that also had Kyle McCord on the top 10. So which, to be fair, he's played well at Syracuse this year, but I've seen enough from last year at Ohio State. The man is not a Heisman caliber quarterback, but I've seen him in top 10 lists other places because he's playing, but he's playing at Syracuse. And the gap of playing in those bigger programs versus playing at Syracuse is the gap we've already gone over a million times. But yeah, I love Colorado. I'm maybe one of the few people. I've tried to stray away from it this year a little bit, but I love Shedeur Sanders. I love Travis Hunter. Honestly, I love Coach Prime and just the energy that he brings. I'm here for it. I used to pick them all the time to upset teams, and then they would suck. And I was like an idiot. But in my heart of hearts, I want them to do well so badly because I just love the vibes. I'm feeling it. I think Travis Hunter is a phenomenal athlete, as you were already saying. I mean, who does that nowadays in college football that plays both positions, both sides of the ball, and does it to an elite level? Yeah. Shedeur Sanders is just disregard his attitude with stuff because you can say whatever. He left the game early and was a sore loser and whatever. He's a little cocky, whatever you want to say. The dude's exciting to watch.
Yeah. I just found that so amazing, and I was just like, dude, like Travis Hunter's elite. And no one's really giving him the respect he deserves.
It's because Colorado's just they're so overhyped because of those three people. Yeah. That when they go out there and they get blown out by a Nebraska, which Nebraska, I mean, they're ranked now. They're looking better with Dylan Raiola, but I think they thought it should have been a closer game. Colorado should have at least won it potentially, and the fact that they just went out there and got torched. Yeah. I think hurts his chances, especially when Archie Manning goes out there and just dominates and is overall impressive.
The thing with Manning though is, I mean, he's going to start for a game, maybe two, while Ewers is hurt, and then it'll be back to business. So I mean, I'm with you. I'm shocked by those odds, but if you are a betting man, I guess take advantage of Travis Hunter's odds being a little bit lower and go do that.
I would think so.
I don't know how you can, and I could not disagree with JP more as a Colorado, but I'll say this. I mean, Travis Hunter's a phenomenal athlete, and I don't know how he doesn't end up in New York. I don't know that he'll win, but I mean, he's going to be in consideration because to play two ways in modern college football is insane. Now he will be able to. I can't remember who it was talking about, but somebody had asked about him doing it in the NFL, and there was an NFL player that said, "Yeah, it's a lot different. That's not going to happen." But regardless, to do that at the Division I level of college football, wild,
insane. It is. Not gonna lie, I just know his practice weeks are just terrible, man. Yeah, just practicing on one side of the ball is tough, man. I could not imagine both. So just shout out to him. But I think he's probably falling in those odds a lot just because they're probably not going to win a lot. That's why I feel like.
Yeah.
I'll just add an asterisk here. Meeting Nation, we do not take any legal responsibility for the betting odds. But yeah, I guess segueing into, I guess, more focusing on Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan obviously now ranked 18, Ohio State ranked 3. Ohio State seems to have a really favorable schedule looking for them. But Michigan, we can start with them. And Josh, you know, you're the Michigan fan here. How do you feel the rest of the season is going to play out for you guys? What do you guys feel needs to be tightened up after the Texas game?
Yeah, so going into the season, my big thing was Michigan had, at least from a preseason standpoint, Michigan had 4 massive games on the schedule. And my opinion was to make the playoff, you probably have to split. So you had Texas, you had USC, you had Oregon, you had Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's 1 or 2 others on there now that we're in season that I go, okay, there's a little bit more meat on the bone to a team like Illinois is a great example. There's a little bit more there than has been in years past. But looking at those 4 games, the opinion was if you can split Texas, USC, Oregon, Ohio State, go 2-2, you can probably make the playoff with that schedule. Coming off the Texas game, again, I don't think the shock was that Michigan lost. I think it was the way in which they did. The obvious, you know, the drop off on offense in particular, like I said earlier, knew it would be a rebuild. I don't think anybody anticipated that it would be such a drastic change from the McCarthy, Corum. You know, you knew that it was going to shift, right? But I don't think anybody anticipated that it was going to shift that much. So coming up on the USC game, I really think that Michigan has 60 minutes to decide what type of season do you want to have. And you know, if they beat USC, you've got all your goals still in front of you. Technically, even if you lose, you do as well. But that kind of sets the tone for what type of team you have. Have you whatever. I think the schedule is just brutal. The schedule is just brutal, and especially right now with a team that, you know, you're entering week 4 and you're about to start a new quarterback. Yeah. You know, and I think Alex Orji is a phenomenal athlete, but obviously the jury is still out on if he's a good quarterback. And so, yeah, I would say for Michigan at this stage, I think the ceiling is probably 9-3. I don't think it's unreasonable to say, hey, you could probably win one of Oregon, Ohio State. I don't think it's unreasonable to say you could win one of those. Could you win more? You know, could you win 2 and make that split? I don't have enough confidence right now in what I've seen to say, yeah, you can. Now, that being said, I'll also say this. There's obviously, you know, I think in Michigan land, there's a lot of negativity like, oh, we lost to Texas. Everything is awful. The season's over. I'm like, okay, it's September. Let's relax.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the big things that will determine what Michigan does moving forward is obviously quarterback situation. What Alex Orji brings to the table is obviously ability. But you've also got to use Alex Orji in an Alex Orji offense. You can't put a guy like him in a drop back passer offense. It will not. There's no reason, and I'll get off the soapbox in a moment. There's no reason why Alex should not be back there with Mullings and Edwards on either side of him every stinking snap. Because what Alex does really well is he forces defenses to hesitate. Because you have to, even if you go, well, we don't respect the pass, you have to account for him. You have to deepen it. You have to hesitate and see, does he have it? Does, you know, Khalil Mullings or Donovan Edwards have it? And Michigan does have speedy guys that those little dink and dunk passes to guys like Samaj Morgan and Tyler Morris, that can matter, but you have to play that type of offense. Yeah. The other thing for Michigan too, and you know, I'll leave it at this, is they've actually got a, I believe, 6th or 7th year like graduate student who's gotten some medical red shirts named Jack Tuttle. Tuttle played at Indiana. He backed up Michael Penix Jr. at one time, played for Indiana, backed up J.J. McCarthy last year, but has had a lot of injuries. he's a guy who's not going to be flashy, but he's going to be very game manager style. And he's going to be a guy who, unlike Davis Ward, who can take care of the football, who can win you games by the mere fact of he can take control of a game by not turning the ball over, not shortening drives, keep the momentum going. So it'll be curious by the time we get into, we don't play Oregon until November 2nd. We play Ohio State, obviously, at the very end of November. I have no idea who will be calling the shots at that point. It probably depends a lot on if Michigan beats USC. If everything goes to heck, you might see Jaden Davis in there, the freshman. Who's to say? But yeah, all that to say, I think there's just a lot of questions moving forward for Michigan. I think 9-3 is the ceiling. I think 7-5 is probably the floor. I'd say I'd probably expect an 8-4 season. I think this is a team that will win the games it's supposed to, and won't win the games it's not supposed to. They don't look to me like a team that will lose games that they're not supposed to, but they also don't look like they're going to upset anybody. Which you come off a national championship season, that's frustrating, but you also understand, okay, you lost a lot, and this is part of what it looks like to rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State, kind of in a different situation, coming off a 52-6 win against Akron, and then another 56-0 win against WMU. You guys got Marshall coming up, then Michigan State. Seems like your schedule, at least JP, you can probably talk more about this, but your biggest challenge might be Oregon on October 12th. But outside of that, looks like you guys might have a free road down. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you play Iowa at home, I think, the week before Oregon, but that's basically the toughest test until you go to Eugene.
Yeah.
And then I know later on down the road, early November, you go to Penn State, which is always a tough matchup. Penn State's a tough team this year. Then obviously, regardless of what Michigan's schedule ends up being at the end of the year, it never matters. It's the game. Both teams get up to play for it. And I've seen Ohio State be undefeated and Michigan not even be ranked. And I've been sweating the entire time because both teams go after it. And so it's weird to judge this Ohio State team right now because, like I was saying earlier, they paid $20-something million. They reload the clip, as they were saying, bringing in basically all their defensive players back from an elite defense. They go out and they get Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss, a stud running back. They brought back Travion Henderson, so now you kind of have a dual threat, almost like what Michigan had last year with Corum and Edwards. You bring back you lose Marvin Harrison, but you bring in a guy like Jeremiah Smith. Not saying that they're on the same level right now, but, I mean, you look at this guy that's a 18-year-old kid, I mean, going out there just absolutely tearing it up. Looking to be early on at least a generational talent for Ohio State. They still got Emeka Ibuka. You still have younger guys that were 5 stars like Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate. You got some running backs that even outside of Travion Henderson, I mean, we got a 4-star freshman named James Peoples that's been tearing it up. Granted, it's been in some garbage time minutes, but I mean, the dude's been performing when he's in. You got Will Howard, who on our podcast I've kind of talked about is an upgrade from Kyle McCord. He's not what I would ever say is an elite level player, but he's what Ohio State needs. I think last year, Kyle McCord and the offensive line were the biggest question marks. The offensive line has looked better, but granted, they've not gone against elite level defenses yet. And so what does that offensive line really look like when they're at a Penn State or they're at Oregon or they play a Michigan who's got a great defensive line? What does that look like? You look at the quarterback and you go, okay, last year we had a guy in Kyle McCord that had the talent. You're seeing him showcase it at Syracuse, but he was inexperienced. It was his first year starting, and he was starting for Ohio State, where the expectations are you better win every game, you better compete for a championship, and don't you dare lose to Michigan. And he didn't do any of that. And that's why there's conversations going into this season about, is this Ryan Day's last year? And your other teams might look at that and go, this is crazy. Ryan Day loses a game or two a year, and you're constantly in the running for the playoffs, all this stuff, but he's lost to Michigan 3 years in a row. He's gotten in his own way. I point back all the time to the Georgia semifinal game where he didn't have the aggressiveness. He was going to go for it on 4th down. Kirby Smart called a timeout. He didn't go for it again. He opted to punt it. They ended up losing that game. And we talked at length. I've brought it up numerous times that I think had he shown a little bit of grit, a little bit of toughness, and went for it, Ohio State wins that game, plays TCU, and most likely wins the championship that year. C.J. Stroud had played out of his mind. You look at last year when they play Michigan and Ryan Day got completely outcoached by Moore. Moore was just significantly more aggressive and wanted it. And so you look at Ohio State this year and you have questions going, okay, well, we know Will Howard is an upgrade. How much of an upgrade? I don't know, because the competition we've played so far, he hasn't needed to be anything. We haven't needed to have what we had last year with Kyle McCord against Notre Dame, where he needs to lead a last-minute drive to get the victory. We haven't needed that. And you won't see what that really looks like until they go to Eugene and they play Oregon, because the schedule just isn't there. I know later on in the year we play Nebraska at home. Nebraska is most likely going to be undefeated coming into the shoe. That's another game that I've got circled. But yeah, you look at – it's just tough to gauge what this team really is going to be like. I know Chip Kelly said a quote that I love. It was very Ted Lasso of him, where he said – players are like tea bags. You don't really know what you get until you put them in hot water. And I think that's the perfect way to describe this Ohio State team. Is the one thing that they've always had is talent. And this year you look at defense and you go, man, every position is just strong. And you look at offense and you go, this is a good enough offense to take them all the way. But how are they going to react when they're in hot water? How are they going to react when they play Oregon on the road, under the lights, having to make that trip where they're going to have to go and travel the night before, play a late game? How are they going to travel and play on the road at Penn State? How's it going to be when they have to face Michigan again? Granted, it's at home this year. How are they going to play against the Nebraska, who at the start of the season we didn't think was going to be a factor, and now we're going, oh crap, that might be a problem. And so I think for now it's too early to really say what they're going to be. I think expectations around Columbus are end of November, you better win the dang game. And I think that's everybody's focus right now. That's why a majority of those guys came back on defense and offense, was they felt like their legacy was missing something. And so I think right now that's kind of their focus. After each game, they've kind of made remarks about it. But yeah, I think we're going to find out a lot about this team come when they go to Oregon and face the Ducks up there. Because right now the schedule, I mean, Marshall's not going to cut it. You're going to see another blowout. And then after that, at Michigan State. Michigan State's terrible. I don't care if they're 3-0. They're terrible. Yeah. It's not going to be a game. You're just not – you don't really know. You're not going to be blown away by Will Howard. He's not going to have an impressive game. They just need to stay healthy, and then we'll find out when they go to Eugene.
Yeah, I guess kind of going back to Michigan, like I know after last year, after McCarthy was gone, I knew Orji was supposed to be the guy. Like he was going to be the guy that came in and started. But I know it was a big shock at the beginning of the year when they said Warren was going to be the starter. What was I don't follow Michigan football a ton, so what was the reasoning why did Warren get the job over Orji?
Yeah, so there's a couple of schools of thought there, and admittedly, the folks that are, the daily beat guys in Ann Arbor probably have a better pulse on this than I do. Read their stuff and go, yeah, that seems right. No, but best I can tell, it seemed like it was Alex's team going into the spring game. Alex took the QB1 snaps and all that stuff, but Davis Warren didn't seem like he was terribly far behind him. We were at the spring game and all that, and I thought Davis threw the ball actually pretty well. It seemed as though maybe in the last couple weeks of fall, the last couple weeks leading into the game, that the gap closed quite, and that Davis maybe outpaced Alex, because the big knock on Orji has been his passing ability, which apparently is something you'd like a quarterback to be able to do. The best I can figure, man, is that Sharon and Kirk Campbell and those guys were seeing stuff in practice where Davis just looked sharper, and said, we feel like this is the best guy to give us a shot. And then after the Texas game, I just, partway through, I'm just looking at it going like, I don't know how you keep trotting him out there. And they just continue to do that. And then Arkansas State, same thing. And then, thank God he threw the third interception and they finally said, okay, enough. And again, we'll see. I mean, they're the reality is like it is concerning that they were seeing something in practice that went, yeah, that's a better quarterback. Like that has to be a concern. If you're being a rational fan, that has to be concerning. But I also think there's something to be said about the athleticism and, like I said, the ability to make defenses hesitate. Where if nothing else, what you're doing right now is not working, so you may as well change it up. You may as well do something different in time to potentially save your season. Because David Warren trotting out there against USC is not going to win you a football game. Alex might not either, but you don't know. So
he reminds Alex Orji reminds me of he was the guy that was on the cover of the last NCAA football game.
Denard Robinson.
Denard Robinson.
Yeah, that's who he reminds me so much of is Denard Robinson.
And if he can, I'll tell you what, if he can pass like half as well as Denard, we might have something there. But again, you've got to. You can tell also, and I'll get off the Michigan train here, but like you can tell also that like it's a younger coaching staff because the way that they're the play calling just doesn't feel quite right. Decision making. Wink Martindale is an absolute liability as a defensive coordinator. That's a whole other blitzing 50% of the time. Maybe don't do that. That's just So there's a lot of questions there, but I think what you're doing is not working. So you may as well hand the kid the keys and say, let's adjust our offense to your strengths, and we'll find out in 48 hours or so whether or not they want to do that.
And speaking on what you said about practice, you're right. Like if that guy Davis Warren, what's his first name? Davis Warren. The fact that he won that battle kind of tells me a lot about Orji, because Orji's already a dual threat. I mean, he's a specimen. I have one of my friends that used to play on UTSA, used to train and went to high school with them.
Oh, wow.
And he was just telling me like how much of a freak athlete like he is, and everybody is in his family and stuff. And I'm like, man, like for him not to win that job to that guy, something's not up for sure. So I'm curious to see how he does. I really hope he does good. But I think he could be, the spark that you guys need to really push you guys over the top. Because, I mean, you guys are used to hanging y'all's hat on running the ball.
Yeah.
And even that's been a struggle. So, just having him out there, that's an extra guy that the defense has to account for in the run game. So I think that could be a big thing.
And I think that's a huge piece of it. And there's there's a number of other pieces we've gone into on the podcast about the usage of certain players and how much you use this running back versus this one and all that. But I think that's exactly right. When you bring in a guy like Alex, we saw this a couple times in the Texas game. I think Orji came in for 2 plays. They were both third downs, and everybody in the country knew that they were runs.
Yep.
That number one, that doesn't do Davis Warren any favors. Number 2, that doesn't help Alex out at all because everybody goes, yeah, I guess that's a run.
Yeah.
If you give him, he's had 2 full drives, I think, this season, and they were both last game, and the first one was for a touchdown. I mean, you have to give guys chances to get into rhythm. You've got to make play calls that fit their all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so my hope is that even if it's still, hey, we're going to just dink and dunk the ball or whatever, that's the only thing you were trusting Warren to do either. So you may as well give a guy who has a run threat. Like if the knock against Orji is that, well, he can't throw the ball very well. Like I come bearing terrible news about Davis Warren. Give us a chance. Right?
Yeah.
We'll see. It'll, I hope Saturday will be a good reveal for Michigan fans about just what Alex can do. And if not, then you go back to the drawing board and you can't quit on it. Like this is what you have. You're going to have to use it at least for this season.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me when they brought in Orji to make those plays, it reminded me of what Texas used to do with Tyrone Swoops.
Yeah, right.
He was there. Like he would come in, he was the big body, third down. All right, everyone get in front of me and block. I'm going to run the ball. And that's exactly what they used him for, was just a big body. All right, it's a third running back is all you're doing is throwing him back there.
Yeah.
Give us a third running back. And it makes it hard because, I'm not comparing Michigan to UTSA, but it's the same concept. When you can't throw the ball, they're just going to key in on the run every time. And that's not doing Donovan Edwards any favors because he needs space to run the ball. It's not doing your quarterback any favors because, you already can't throw the ball. So then you're losing another part of the offense. And so if you can add in a guy that it brings in the read option threat or the speed option threat, even when you bring in a guy that can do that, it adds some sort of dimension where like, all right, we have to think about this guy now. With Warren, you really didn't have to think about him. He threw 3 picks. Like he was gonna mess up. And so you were just like, all right, key in on the run. If we need to drop back, we can play coverage with X amount of guys, and they're not gonna have a problem covering. And so bringing in Orji, I think it's gonna be very interesting to kind of see. It's gonna be, I think you said, more interesting to see if Michigan changes the way they run their offense, because if they don't, he's not set up for success.
That's the. I mean, there's so many questions, but I think that's one of the major concerns is some of the guys that are, again, more on the ground in Ann Arbor that are in and out of Schembechler Hall all the time have looked at it and are kind of going, man, like if we don't make that adjustment, and some concern about the coaching adjustments that haven't been made yet, which you can tell it's a young coaching staff. Sharon's in his first head coaching gig. Like all those things are very evident. That doesn't mean that the sky's falling. It just means you need to be honest about where you're at.
Yeah.
But I hope they give him the best chance to succeed. Even if they lose that game, I at least want to look at it and go, they called a good game. He played well. They gave him a chance to succeed. If they don't do that, then we're going to have a very angsty podcast on Monday.
Man, and I really want to see what I want to see from Michigan, man, is they have one-on-one opportunities on the outside. I mean, almost every single play.
Yep.
So I would love to see them sometimes just take a shot, man. Just rise up, take a shot. Worst thing that could happen is, they bat the ball down. What are the odds? They pick it off. And I think that right there will open their offense up so much, because they're going to face single high safety probably the rest of the season, just because nobody trusts their pass game at all.
Yeah.
And I know specifically, like for us, whenever we're scouting for a team that runs, like has a running quarterback, you can throw out half of our defensive coverages, like because you don't want your back turned to that guy, not a lot of 2-man and things like that. So he's going to be facing a lot of zones, man. He's just going to have to fit some tight balls in there on third downs. But man, I think he's going to do really good.
Your lips to God's ears, my friend.
I hope the opposite.
Hey, please mute mics, okay?
I think more interesting too for Ohio State's going to be with such kind of, I'm not saying a weak schedule, but not a very strong schedule. When you're kind of playing games like that, and then you're going to go say play an Iowa at Iowa, who's got a really good defense, one of the best defenses in the country, and you see it all the time that they're just not giving up points. It's like, how are they going to go from playing these teams that just aren't great and kind of like, all right, I can just kind of don't have to be great to win this game, to a team that where you're not going to be able to make mistakes, so they're going to take advantage of those mistakes. And so it's just going to be really interesting to see, like, hey, with not a great schedule to start, like what's going to happen there.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing, like with Will Howard specifically in comparison to Kyle McCord last year's. There were numerous games with Kyle McCord against teams like Penn State last year was an example. I want to say Maryland was another example where he had some terrible decision-making. I mean, held onto the ball too long, tried to extend the play too much. That's just not his game. He got lucky a handful of times that it wasn't a crucial turnover. You saw a couple of those throws even against Notre Dame at the end where it was like, clinch your butts a little bit because dude's about to turn the ball over and lose the game. And Will Howard, I think, I think this is like his 5th year in college football, and he's been a starter at Kansas State for years. This isn't his first rodeo. You hope that experience and the maturity that he brings will fix that issue. And then another issue that they've kind of been plagued by in recent years is the running back room. Travion's had a hard time staying healthy for an entire season. When he's healthy, he's great. Yeah. But last year specifically, when he went down, you had Chip Trainum and you had Mayan Williams, who Mayan Williams didn't really produce like he had the year before when Travion went down. Chip Trainum was all right, but I mean, he wasn't going to replace what you lost in Travion. And now you've kind of got that dual head where you're not putting as much pressure on Travion. You can mix Quinshawn out there and get the same productivity out of it. And so, I think this year my hope is that because they all came back, that they stay focused on those games. That's been kind of the thing that's bit them the past couple of seasons is they get into those games against weaker opponents and they kind of play down to them. Yeah. And the focus just hasn't really been there. And I'm hoping that this year you see none of that. I mean, normally in years past, even against like a Western Michigan or an Akron, you would see those teams kind of drive a couple drives and you'd be like, man, come on. Like step it up on defense a little bit here. Like it would be early on, first drive, and Akron would be driving down the field threatening to score. Yeah. And this year, I mean, Western Michigan was a great example. The defense held them to under 100 yards total, which is just crazy. It was their first shutout in 5 years. And, I mean, even when they were playing third or fourth string guys, they were still going out there and hitting hard, making plays. It didn't matter who they subbed in. So you saw a different level of focus, even in a blowout, which normally in years past you kind of see them ease off the gas a little bit, not really run plays. But I think even Western Michigan, they went for it on fourth down with Julian Sane, who was a transfer from Alabama, and ended up getting a touchdown on the play. And so the aggressiveness there from Ryan Day is just something I've not seen really. And I think that's because Chip Kelly's calling the offense now. And so I think that'll be a huge difference come those big games. I'm hoping the aggressiveness that, in my opinion, lost us games against Michigan last year and then also lost us the game against Georgia. I hope those things get fixed, because if that gets fixed, this Ohio State team is viewed entirely different.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, so segueing into the last couple of questions as we wrap up right now, focusing, I guess, more on macro, maybe a little more lighthearted. Obviously, everyone's heard of the Madden curse. If you're on there, your team is not going to perform well. NCAA College Football 25 recently released their new cover, had Donovan Edwards on there, had Quinn Ewers, had Travis Hunter. How do you guys feel about, I guess, this kind of like, conspiracy of like, okay, if you got those guys on there, you're not going to perform well? And then to segue from there, I guess to close out here, what do you guys think is going to be the ultimate ranking at the end of the season? Obviously, it's really early, but if you have predictions, how do you see teams running out? Texas obviously being the 1,000-pound gorilla, but everyone else, who do you think is going to be the runner-up? And I'll let whoever wants to start.
Okay.
I mean, God.
I think the top four that will end up is going to be Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, and that fourth team I'm still kind of on. Right now I'm going to say Oregon, just because just that's where they've earned to be, just until proven otherwise. But yeah, with the NCAA curse, I really hope it's not a thing. But I mean, already Donovan Edwards isn't having his best year. Yeah. Quinn did get hurt, so I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, I think the weird thing is I think that Texas Georgia game, that could be a national championship preview. Being totally honest, those are two powerhouse teams, SEC teams that could be like, all right, we're just going to copy and paste that to the national championship, because that's very well what could happen. Mm-hmm. And because I'm looking at it, I'm looking at Texas, I'm looking at Georgia, I'm looking at Ohio State, and I'm looking at Alabama. Jalen Milroe looks very different this year compared to previous years. And they got that 17-year-old wide receiver who is a dog. That dude is so good. And like I said, I saw Milroe. I was watching the game this past week. Milroe was making some throws that I didn't see him make last year, that are like perfectly dropped into the breadbasket, leading receivers, throwing the deep ball, not just taking off with his feet. And so I'm looking at Alabama this year, and I'm like, okay, they look like Milroe looks like he's finally coming to his own and matured since last year. And I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with as well, just like always.
Yeah, I like that. My only hesitation there, because Texas, Georgia, absolutely two at the top. I don't know if I can buy a third SEC team in there. I think it's hard not to say Alabama. It's hard for me not to say Tennessee as well. Yeah. And frankly, you've got Ole Miss sitting there. So I mean, we're talking about the gap between conferences, and it's as much as I hate it, SEC is heavy right now. Yeah. But I guess I roll Georgia and Texas. I would roll Ohio State in there just because I do think the schedule is favorable. Yeah. And I don't know. I guess I'll do it. I'll throw Tennessee in there. Nico is possibly one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and that's just a good football team. And Alabama, for me, while they look strong, I look just little things, right? Like little weaknesses, like being in a dogfight with South Florida late. Yeah. And again, you could say the same thing about Georgia. So, okay, fair point. But there's something about Alabama. I just go, it's a really good team, but do I think that they they could get that far. I don't know. I also, in that game, to be completely honest with you, I think I fell asleep on the couch, like a 1-point game, woke up, we're up by 30.
Yeah.
And I thought I was having a stroke. Like, it was. But yeah, I'd throw Tennessee in there too. I think they're good. And the fun thing about all that too, kind of like you were saying, man, is these SEC teams, in one sense, they'll kind of eat each other up, but also with the expanded playoff, I mean,
They're going to be in it.
I have one dark horse team that I'd like to throw in there too is Miami. I think Cam Ward is looking really strong this year.
Yeah.
Their offense is looking really high powered. I think that's a team that could kind of sneak under the radar and maybe squeeze up there into a semifinal. I think they look really good, especially, I mean, when you can go in and beat Florida the way they did, not just beat them, but make them look stupid. I think that is a high powered offense.
Yeah. Good choice.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the top three of the top three. I think it's Texas. You got Georgia and then Ohio State. I think there's a realistic chance, just because I think going to Eugene and then going to Penn State are some tough games for Ohio State. It wouldn't totally surprise me to see them drop one of those, but I think those are the top three. I don't see those really moving. I want to go with Alabama too, just because I feel like Jalen Milroe has something to prove. I like them. They're a good squad overall. But the team that I hope does is Ole Miss. I was not on board with them at the beginning of the year, but I love Jackson Dart. I think he's just super fun to watch, and it would be an easy team to be able to root for as a secondary thing going in. So it won't happen, but I'll be cheering for it.
No, for sure.
Last question, wrapping up here. Going to be more UTSA focused, but question actually you guys Rivalry sent in. It was that Central Committee, they're doing an owl quest. So basically UTSA is playing every school that has an owl as a mascot. So obviously we beat Kennesaw State 20-16. Tighter than maybe we would like it to be. After that, we're playing Rice, FAU, and Temple. I guess this is going to be more focused to David and Kelechi. How do you guys think we're going to play against those teams? And then as far as the macro goes, how do you guys think we're going to end up at the end of the season? Do you think we're going to be conference championships or maybe more just middle of the ground?
I mean, me personally, I'm looking – I would look at this season if we can go 8-4, 7-5.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good year, because I think you look at UTSA, they just – They don't have what they had last year, and it's such a big – because they're basically having to change the whole offense. Because you had a quarterback who would basically run in the offense, and now that's completely gone, and you're leaving the keys to someone new. And so I think if I look and they get a winning record, make a bowl game, I don't think they'll be in contention with the American this year, just because there's so many good teams in the American this year. Like, I think you make a 7-5, make a bowl game, win a bowl game, hopefully. I think you look at that and say that's a successful season. Because you just – I think you come in with the new quarterback. A lot of pieces are gone, injuries as well. I think you look at it and you're like, okay, you're gonna beat some of the low-level American teams, but the teams like Tulane, ECU, you look at Army. Army's always given us trouble. And so, I mean, I think a 7-5 season is kind of – it would be really successful for them post Frank Harris era.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I can kind of agree with that. I would say – I expect us to finish top 3 in the American. I could see maybe like a Memphis and Tulane finishing over us. As far as all the OWL schools, we should win for sure against all of them.
No, I agree.
But yeah, I'm really curious to see how we do in conference, man. I think it's a really even playing field this year, and I think that game against Army is going to tell us a lot about how we'll do for the rest of the conference.
100%.
There you go, guys. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, Rivalry, thanks for you guys coming in. You guys supported us early, so we're always happy to have you guys in, and we really appreciate it. And hopefully, in the next few weeks, we'll have some better news for UTSA fans as well as Michigan fans. Ohio State, you guys keep trucking on. But beyond that, everyone have a good week. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.
See y'all.